Alrighty, so I'm here today with SocDoneLeft, and we're going to talk about gun policy. I understand that we have a few things we disagree on, a few things that we might agree on, and hopefully we can change each other's minds. I know that SocDoneLeft tends to have a lot of data on hand, so if there's data that supports his arguments, then there's a much higher likelihood of me being swayed. But why don't you introduce yourself, SocDoneLeft?
Hey, I'm Aiden. I run the channel SocDoneLeft. You can find me socdoneleft.org/live, where I'm trying to stream, hoping to stream tomorrow. And yeah, I think I probably take one of the more quote-unquote anti-gun positions within the left, where Zan takes one of the more pro-gun positions, and I'd be happy to explain. I had some notes on the video you did on, quote, the only correct take on gun control.
True.
So I'd be happy to give some critiques of that. But in general, I'd love maybe just to hear, as a starter, your general take on firearms and how they should work in society.
Okay, so a lot of my positions on firearms have developed much more since I became a firearm owner, because to own firearms, at least where I do, there is training required, or at least heavily recommended, at least to make the process easier for getting a gun. For me, I went ahead and got my concealed weapons license, even though there is constitutional carry, which I am against in the state of Florida. I decided to get my concealed weapons license because for future gun purchases, I'm background checked. Even though they do one there when you buy the gun, I don't have to worry as much about wait times. I could go literally right now in Florida. I could walk into a gun store to, say, a Rural King, pay $1,600, buy an AR-15, and walk right on out 10 minutes later after my background check and signing my forms. And so I ended up doing a lot of research. A lot of the training they have you do for getting your concealed weapons license involves learning statistics and shit. They really like to hammer into you the statistics on how many defensive shootings there have been in any given span of time. They quiz you on that for getting your license. They have you take a test and everything. And so my position is basically defaulted to, at the moment, that gun violence and guns in general, let's start with guns as an object, are not much different than drugs. And that prohibition does not really seem to solve the problem, especially when you bring in criminalization as a way of actually enforcing said prohibition. It tends to come along with a lot of additional problems, especially when we're talking about America's f***ed up criminal justice system, which, as much as I would like to say we could just fix it, I'd like to fix it before we condemn too many people to prison for certain things. Anyway, on top of that, in regards to I'm sorry, I'm a bit high right now, so finding my thoughts whenever I've got a branching
I'll take it.
thing I'm trying to do is a little difficult, so bear with me. Also, I'm not bridge burning or anything, so we're not gonna get too heated here. Another thing that I found myself sort of falling towards is the position that there's a lot of guns in this country. A whole lot of guns. And when you look at the statistics for shootings, especially mass shootings, it tends not to be rifles, or even short barrel pistols that can go full auto. It tends to be just standard pistols you could buy in any gun store, just an auto loader, not even Glocks with switches, not even the banned assault weapons that are that can go full auto. It's your standard Glock or a little snub nose revolver. The Saturday Night Special. These tend to be the most common guns used in crime, and that's pretty inarguable, I'm pretty sure. I'll let you interject if you want to argue against that fact, because if I'm wrong on it, I want you to correct me.
Sure. I guess just to start with an overview, I'm pretty skeptical of the idea that guns make society safer, either for individuals or freedom from tyranny. And I'd be happy to talk about one of the things in your video. You did talk about the defensive uses of guns. And I think the stats on that are just dead wrong. That that stat that you might have heard literally comes from an election denying arch conservative Republican.
That's
that
probably why they teach it. That's probably why they teach it in the CWL classes.
But that doesn't mean it's wrong. I think it's wrong on the merits. And and I guess the starting position I would take is that I think the position I've settled on is it seems like household ownership of guns is what leads to most of the problems associated with guns. Like most gun deaths aren't even homicide; they're self-deletion. I don't know what term you like to use on for
You can just say,
monetization.
I don't do the whole monetization dance around the subject thing. You can just say suicide.
Sure. So suicide is like 2/3 of deaths from guns, and homicide is the other. And most homicides are people who know each other, or like usually some sort of organized
Domestic
crime.
violence as well is a big issue with
Yeah.
gun violence.
Yeah, like people who know each other, especially family members, are I believe the majority of deaths from guns. So I do bring it up just because like there is a degree to which if guns weren't available, then people would still achieve those ends by other means. However, I guess one of the stats that first changed my mind on all of this is just looking at other countries. Like the United States does not have more violent crime than other countries, but it does have about a 5 times higher violent crime rate than any other. I'm sorry, not violent crime rate, a 5 times higher homicide rate than other countries. Same violent crime, 5 times higher homicide rate. And the obvious suggestion to me is like, oh, well, that's probably because instead of doing a violent crime with like a knife or something, they're doing it with a gun. And this is very weak evidence. This isn't causal. It's just correlation.
It makes
but
sense.
It's a pretty big difference. I sent a graph on the question, but I guess the stake I've come around to is it seems like household gun ownership seems to be the key to a lot of those problems. And I think that the only argument for guns that I think I still really accept anymore is the idea that they could be used to oppose tyranny. And so I've come around to the position that there should be communal armories, maybe even publicly funded communal armories and ranges at which people can go and practice and shoot, but that to as much a degree as possible, household gun ownership basically should be like the goal would be to end that. That's obviously not happening in 100 fucking years in the United States, but the goal would be to shift everything to communal armories. So it's a pretty radical take in America, but
I don't think I'm not stopping any tyranny with these goddamn like California, Washington ass magazine limits. No, I don't really believe in the whole stopping tyranny thing. While I do think that disarming a population is definitely weakening said population, like if you're going to try to subject a population to the rule of your will after, say, committing a government coup, like a military coup or something, or getting enough of your supporters in power to successfully coup yourself back into government positions like Trump tried to do, then the idea of having a disarmed population sounds a little scarier than having an armed one in that scenario. Like, obviously, I don't expect a full-on uprising against the government, but worst case scenario, yeah, it would be nice for the for population to be armed. But it's really just sort of a what-if scenario, right? Because in the reality of it, we have an insane amount of guns in this country, and I completely agree with you on everything you've brought up. As for, like, the armory thing, I think I would be fine with that in an ideal scenario, but the problem is that lots of people that are bad have guns. And the issue is if, like, I know this is sort of a tired argument, but if like, there are bad guys out there with guns, and none of us good guys have guns except cops, and I don't trust them, have guns, then the bad guys with guns basically have a superpower. Like a guy with a gun and nobody else has one, that guy's got superpowers pretty much. And so one of the concerns is with how many guns there are in the country, and the fact that with just a couple metal parts and a 3D printer you can make your own, is the fact that, like, yeah, you would basically make criminals superheroes, or not superheroes, supervillains. They'd have way more power than the average person could ever hope to muster against them for self-defense. And I think one of the best ways to crimp down on that issue as, like, an actual policy is heavily restricting ammo sales. Would probably be the best way to do that. It would take a while for the ammo to dry up in the, like, out there in the world, in the country that people have. You could buy it, you could find it. There's just a lot out there. A lot of it goes bad, it gets wet, it gets humid, it gets too hot, it gets too cold. But after a while, eventually the ammo would get used up. And with strong enough restrictions and ammo, that might see a pretty sizable decrease. My main issue is that, while I agree 100% on everything having to do with household gun ownership, the suicides, domestic violence, that's one of the biggest ones. I think that there needs to be, very similar to what Canada does, every gun owner in this country needs to be on a registry. And they need to have their daily background checks, just like Canada does for every gun owner in the country. Canada does it. We could do it. We could totally do it. Not only that, but if they need to call your loved ones and contact your exes. They do this in Canada. If you're a gun owner, they contact your exes and ask if they're afraid of you or if they don't want you having a gun. And if they say they don't want you having a gun, you don't get to have a gun. And that sounds really over the top and extreme, but I mean, with how many cases of gun violence are literally, like, generally guys shooting their, like, ex-girlfriends or whatever, I think it's an apt policy. I don't want anybody obtaining a gun through legal means and using it for a crime. I don't want that ever. The more strict there are of barriers to get guns legally, the happier I am. My only issue is in the state of where firearms are now is when states, it's usually states, ban particular firearms entirely. Even when it comes to ranges. When I go to my local range, I can't go fire an AR-15. Like, I mean, I can, but it's got the limited magazine, and it can't go full auto. Like, you know, even in that controlled, safe environment where they've got everything locked down, it sucks that even in the most guaranteed, just people having fun, trying to do some marksmanship scenarios, we've kind of, you know, limited how much fun you can have with guns, because guns are fun. I hope you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd totally be down for, like I said, I'm totally on board with the idea of like public funded ranges or something in the people's socialist utopia of America. You know, you go down to the range with your people's bullets and your people's guns and you shoot them full auto at the people's targets. But I guess, so I will agree with you that rifles are very much not a threat in terms of a big proportion of like homicide or suicide. The only thing they seem to be a major threat for is like mass violence. And that's a pretty small portion, like around 1% of the violence. So like the overwhelming problem is actually handguns. It's the cheap guns in particular too.
Yeah.
Like unironically, a lot of why handguns are so correlated with crime has to do with the fact that they can cost less than $1,000. It's not like a life-changing expense to make if you need one to do for the purpose of committing a crime. So
yeah.
Like unironically, one of the arguments I would be very amenable actually to the opposite argument that instead of doing the assault weapons ban, there should be handgun bans. And the Supreme Court has completely struck the ability to do that down, so it's not really an option anymore. But maybe if we get 6 libs on there.
Well, the problem is I don't even know if with libs there's political willpower, because the problem is that we agree on a lot because there's so many problems with guns in this country. And one of them is the amount of them out there, right? And a lot of them are just criminal, or just ghost guns is like the phrase for them, but that's a pretty broad category. These could be 3D printed guns. They're guns with their serial numbers filed off. They're guns that have just been hidden. They're guns that have had their barrels. Because like one of the ways that the police track gun crime, like say someone shot another person and just left the scene and there's no casing on the scene, you can take the bullet and you can look at the scratchings and the markings on the side of the bullet, because every barrel has unique markings and unique scuffage that will leave a unique trail on the bullet, and you can track it to a particular barrel. And so there's a ton of ways in which people have kind of caught up with that to try to ghost their guns to make them less traceable, whether that be just taking the barrel out and destroying it, defacing serial numbers and changing them. All these things illegal, but criminals do them anyway because they don't give a fuck. They you know... And I think even in Republican states, I was surprised to hear this, that even in Republican states like Florida, they've actually voluntarily instilled their own common sense gun safety policies. Because to be fair, as evil as Republicans are, I don't think they want people shooting each other all over the place.
Yeah.
In the state of Florida, they raised the limit to buy guns, handguns, to the age of 21. 18 is how old you can be to buy an AR-15 in Florida, but you got to be 21 to buy a Glock 19.
Actually, another odd thing that DeSantis did that was good was he was one of the earlier governors in the country to sign a red flag law that so you were talking earlier that if your exes think that you're a threat and don't want you to have a gun, the red flag law is sort of similar. If you post on social media that you want to do some sort of mass violence, if your family members are reporting it, if you've got police investigation, FBI investigation, whatever, then for X many years, I want to say it's like 6 months or 12 months. And maybe it should be longer, shorter. I don't know. We don't actually have any evidence on it yet because these are all new. But like, unironic good thing that DeSantis did. We have no idea if it's had an effect yet. But Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to see those expand, and as you say, maybe bring it to more than just a red flag of I want to do mass violence, but also intimate partner violence, because that's an
Yeah.
overwhelming part of it. Like, actually, some of the best studied parts of gun laws are like when the Gun Control Act was expanded in the 90s, it reduced intimate female partner homicides by I think 15% by gun, and didn't affect non-gun homicides at all. So like there's a very big effect of reducing access to guns on women getting killed. So I would like to have less of that.
The interesting thing is there's certain types of crimes that tend to be committed with legally obtained guns, and there are types of crimes that tend to be committed with non-legally obtained guns, right? So, for example, in the 1990s, we passed a firearms or a assault weapons ban, right? So and the big problem with this ban was, as much as I wish I could shoot a full auto AK-47, I probably won't be able to unless I go to like a range in Vegas. I think that's where you can do it. But besides that, it's like really hard. You have to find someone who owns one, because what the ban did was grandfather in all the already owned guns. So as long as you file the proper paperwork, even with a private sale, you can sell and distribute those guns still. It just has to be private sale, I'm pretty sure. I don't think like a licensed FFL can sell them. I'm pretty sure. I may be wrong, though. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or in the chat. But those private sales means that tons of people, majorly gun nuts from like the 80s and prior to that in the 90s, have like stockpiles of ammo and literally full auto guns. They've got guns from Vietnam. They've got old full auto World War II guns. They've got guns from like modern wars as well. From like whenever we were fuck, my brain's blanking on right now. When we were in Afghanistan, some of those guns, Gulf War in Afghanistan, we've got those guns too are in this country as well, and people own them. And it's a very small subsection of people that own them. And now those guns are a massively increasing in value investment. The people who own them are either holding on to them, if they're smart, to sell later, or selling them now for tens of thousands of dollars. If you want to buy an AK-47, you can legally buy one from someone who has one if it's like, you know, through the legal process and all that, and you sign the paperwork, because it has to still be tracked. It has to be a legal sale. You can still buy one through private sale, though, but you're not going to get one for under 10K. They're just going up massively in price. And, you know, they get destroyed and stuff over time, but those firearms are eventually going to end up becoming a, you know, a rare commodity over time. It won't be anytime soon, but, like, people have them. They're just stocked away, right? And I worry that the people who do have them are bad. You know, maybe not the people you want to be having them. You know, maybe your right-wing nut job types, like, you know.
I mean, kind of. But, I mean, it just does seem that, like, so one of the things I watched your video on gun control, and the first thing you got mad at was California's high capacity magazine ban, and I actually pretty strongly disagree with that one. So because, like, yes, there's a few people who collect guns, but by and large, those aren't the people doing incidents of mass violence. The people who are doing incidents of mass violence are virtually every single one documented to date has like a serious mental health problem. They're often very early on in their life, and they aren't seeing a lot of success. So the type of person who has tens of thousands of dollars for like their private pet projects to buy a gun is usually not the type of person who's like having troubles getting out of school, having troubles making it in early life, and taking out their frustration on other people.
They buy cheap guns, right? So they're not buying those insane like guns that people are scared of, that are very politically what I was getting around to was like what we probably would agree on, and that's Democrat policy and messaging needing to change, and maybe just at least get more accurate. Like, it can be anti-gun, it can be about like gun policy, pro-gun, like, you know, pro-gun safety policy, but I'd like it to be more accurate. Like the stuff like 9mm will blow the lungs out of the body's got to stop. But moving back towards what was on topic, is you're right. Like, when people are, the majority of gun violence, I believe, or I may be getting this mixed up, I believe the number one cause of death of people under the age of 18 in this country are guns. So I believe that statistic's true.
It's the leading cause of under 18s, but it's mostly because young adults are immortal. Like, they can't fucking die from anything but poison, cars, and guns. So
Well, yeah, well, that's probably a big part of it too. Like, yeah, kids would probably be pretty hardy, but I think a lot of it is a variety of things. So a big one is not so we agree on everything that's going to be like making it harder to legally obtain guns, like every policy, every class or license you should have to take. I fucking hate constitutional carry. The amount of people who are going to hurt themselves and others with constitutional carry in Florida is going to be astronomical in the coming years. I assume you know what constitutional carry is?
Is it just oh god, what's the name for it? At will issue or whatever?
No, it's not even that. At will issuing is, Florida does that too. It's basically at will issuing is when they, like, if you try to go through the process to get your permit and they don't get to the permit within a certain amount of time, they'll just give it to you. They don't do the background check. They don't go through the process. If the 30 or 60 days that they have to do the process passes, because it's the police station, the police department, and the court system that are doing the, like, permit process, and it's the state that are, like, mandating how long they have to do it. And in will issue states or shall issue states, they just do it by default if the court system and the police run out of time to do it. And so that's different, though. But in the state of Florida now, if you can legally own a gun and you do, you can just carry it. Just carry it.
I see. So it's totally permitless.
Permitless carry. That's what it's called, yeah. But they call it constitutional carry, too, yeah.
Look,
I hate it. So many people are going to hurt themselves. It's insane. So many people.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that is very clear from causal data is that buying a gun does causally increase your risk of self-harm. Like, it's not just that people who are at risk of self-harm buy guns. It's actually the other way around. That, like, for something like 12 years after you buy a gun, your rate of self-harm is about 10 times higher than those who don't buy a gun. It's a very long-lasting, large effect. And it seemed... Go ahead.
Well, I'm interested in, like, what the context to that is. I'm not, like, challenging it. I'm curious because, like, is it that people get a gun and that contributes to, like, thoughts of suicide and so they self-harm, or...
So it's a little bit related to, okay, for a model of, like, how suicide happens is there needs to be something bad in your life, like depression, or just like a general, like you're generally low. There's usually a trigger of some kind. Like, this is where trigger warnings and stuff come from. There's a trigger in your life that leads you to have thoughts of it. Thoughts of it can lead you to a plan, and if you decide to go through with the plan, then it actually happens. And each step here is usually like 10 times less common. So people who have thoughts, there's like 1/10 who make a plan, and of those who make a plan, there's a 10th who go through with it. And the reason why the plan matters for guns is guns are quick, and people think they're pretty painless, and they work.
People survive gunshot, like, wounds to the head, though. That's the insane thing.
They do, but the rate of survival is about 1 in 6. It's about, I think, like 1 in 3 for bridges and like 1 in 2 for poison. It's not 1 in 2 for poisoning. I think it's 9 in 10 for poisoning. I can send you a graph. Like, guns are the method to. It's a
suicide button. It's a suicide button that people can have in their houses.
Essentially, and that makes the plan really easy. In short, it's not I have to drive out to a bridge. It's literally just open the drawer. And so, like, that's the model for that studiers of suicidology have come to, that, like, go ahead.
Oh, no, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I don't want to interrupt, but I guess the only impasse we really come to is the question of, do people in America who like to own guns and like to shoot them, they love marksmanship, and, like, as much as it would be cool to have, like, a neighborhood armory or a community armory, it's nice to have your own gun in your house, you know? Like, the fact that I can go and reach over and like, clean my gun, but, like go home from the range, clean my gun whenever I feel like it, because sometimes I put it off and I like to put a YouTube video on and then I take it apart and I clean it. Like there's there's a lot to having guns, like the culture of it too, the non-toxic parts of it, which I'm trying to become a part of. Like, a lot of it's a trade-off for people who like to own guns. A lot of people who own guns, it's an aspect of their lifestyle. And when it's attacked in any way, it can be a pretty big bruise to them. But I think as long as they're allowed to have them, then they're happy. So long as they're not committing crimes or doing anything bad and don't plan to do anything bad and haven't done anything bad. Like, as long as the average do-gooder gun owner American doesn't feel attacked by gun policy, that's when we're walking the line well. One of the things I've noticed is a problem with the Democrats lately is the very blatant messaging of legal gun owners being an enemy, that they're selfish and that they want to have their pew pew shooty guns while millions die, and they just don't care. And in the meantime, they show images of things like AR-15s, and they talk about how this is a direct Biden quote that I very begrudgingly have had to talk about right-winger gun channels really running away with. They loved this quote. They made so much content off of it. Biden said, the 9mm blows the lungs out of the body. You don't need anything that powerful. And I believe he went on to say that 22 is more reasonable, with a suggestion that, like, he would make it so 22 would be the only thing you could buy as far as ammunition goes. And it was a very bizarre statement. And the assault weapons thing as well. The phrase assault weapons isn't a classification that exists for weaponry, like within military or like gun manufacturing or anything. No one uses that term except for Democrat politicians. It was a term used to describe the guns that are scary. Like, a lot of them, it doesn't even matter how they function or what they can do, it's how scary they are, is what determines whether or not the media wants them banned. The media, Democrat politicians, or people who are more in favor of outright gun bans. And I'm fine with people having the position, but I prefer it be based in more in reality. A lot of it seems to be based out of fear. I've met a lot of people who are anti-gun because they're scared of them and have never shot one, and like they go and they shoot one for the first time and they're like, I still believe in pretty sensible gun policy, but I'm far less anti-gun than I was before, because a lot of their beliefs were driven by fear, and the Democrats hardcore like kind of message to those people that are scared of guns, and that's why they're anti-gun. Meanwhile, heavily ostracizing the people that are into guns.
I will totally agree. I think I might even be willing to make the argument that, to some degree, Republicans like to fearmonger around like drag queens and whatnot, and that's based in completely nothing, right? That's complete fabrication. But the analogy is that school shootings are horrific. They are like deeply traumatizing events, and they do traumatize lots and lots of people. Democrats want to capitalize on that and try and win their broader political goal of gun control that leads them to bad solutions. Like, it leads them to care about the scary black guns, is the name sometimes that conservatives give for assault rifles.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's not actually the threat to people's safety and well-being. Like, the if you want to end mass violence, you fundamentally need like single payer healthcare. You fundamentally need like red flag laws and like delays on purchase. Like, I'm willing to say something like 15-day or even a month delay on getting a gun, which I think the 1990s act was 10 days nationwide.
10 days, but I'm mad now. I love that Simpsons quote so much. I'm sorry, you go on.
I mean, that's the exact point, right? Is that like if you truly want a gun for either, like, if you feel it's necessary for your self-preservation, which and this is maybe where we might go to, where I think there might be a disagreement on the stats of self-defense, then you should still want it a month down the line. You shouldn't need it like today. But people who might want to hurt someone, themselves, others, who want it today, that does seem like something they might cool off from. So that's, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like the, I'm fine with wait times. It was definitely pretty, like, agonizing doing the wait time for mine. But to be fair, like, I have dual residence because I spend enough time in Florida that I can also have residence there. So I just got mine there because it's easier. And so, like, I have my Florida ID, I do the whole background check thing, they run me through the system, they verify I'm all good. And I had to wait 3 days for it. And because I was on a trip, and, like, I go back and forth, so I'm like, I gotta go back to Washington at the end of the week, but I also want to get my gun while I'm here. And then I also have to fly back to Washington with it, which is itself its whole own ordeal, flying with a gun. You have to check it in and go through TSA with it, and you got to declare declare a firearm and all that. Whole process is really stressful. You have to spend as much money as a gun on a hard case that can lock really well, because TSA, when they know you have a gun in there, even though you're allowed to do this and everything, and they are not allowed to open your gun case and touch your gun without you present, it is against the law. They still take axes and fucking ice picks to your case, and when you get your case out of the baggage claim, I'm talking, it's a Pelican case, if you know what that is. It's a tank of a goddamn gun case. It's got like chip marks in it and axe hacking marks in the hinges and in the areas like the weak points they would have thought, like the areas you would want to try to weaken. And like TSA tries to get to that shit. It's insane.
You're bringing like a turtle armored case in.
You have to, or TSA will get to it. You should see the locks I used on those things. Yeah, no, it's completely against the law for TSA to get into your luggage, and if whenever they do damage your stuff or into your gun case, and when they do damage your stuff, the airline doesn't like TSA like going through your stuff. They're liable for the damage TSA does, so you can make a claim with the airline and get your stuff. I'm stun locking on a different thing. Anyway, the thing with Democrat gun policy and gun messaging. Oh yeah, you good? Sorry.
No. Like that's what I totally believe that TSA is completely insane about guns as they are about literally everything else. So yeah. So like when it comes to gun policy, I want as many barriers to criminals or to be criminals getting guns through legal means, whether it be suicide, domestic violence, mass shootings, anything like that, whether it be age limits of up to 21 years old. I think 25. I think I'm 24. I don't think I should be legally allowed to get a gun because of my age. I'm fine. Like, I'm a legal gun owner. I'm a safe gun owner. I'm a legal gun owner. I do things properly. But the average 24-year-old, I don't know. I don't know if the average 24-year-old should have a gun. I genuinely don't know. Like, I trust myself, and I've taken the classes, and I diligently go out of my way to learn more safety stuff. I don't think that's the average 24-year-old who owns a gun. I really don't. And we already know the human brain doesn't develop fully until at least the age of 25. I'm fine with a higher age limit. I'm fine with, like, restrictions on ammo sales. Not like bans, but, like, you know, like, background checks whenever you buy ammo. Like, that's reasonable. Like, you should have to get a background check when you buy ammo. That's not a thing. At least not in Washington. I literally, like... Here, I can go, if I just take a moment. See, one of the things that I actually want to talk about is the fact that in more progressive states, they tend to do something like what they do here, which is taxing the fuck out of ammo. Ammo is, like, really heavily taxed here, which is, like, literally nothing but to, like, screw over and upset, like, gun owners. Like, what's that do other than piss them off? So when you can get a good deal on ammo, you go for it, which is why I bought an entire fucking box of 9mm. This is literally... Zan showed off his armory.
14 boxes of 50 rounds per box. Because when these things go on sale... and you can get them for a real good price, you get them for that good price. Holy shit. It was really, really, really a good price.
Well, this might be a point of disagreement then. So, like, I have a list in my fact sheet of the policies that I think that most would reduce violence. One of them is I am of the opinion that we should be taxing gun producers to some degree, like artificially increasing the price of all guns and all ammunition. And I don't know the exact amount, but like it is pretty unequivocally clear that taxing stuff does reduce how much people consume. Like we see it. In fact, you mentioned prohibition. Taxes on smoking are one of the most effective anti-smoking policies that we've observed. I want to say that every dollar added is like 5% less people who smoke. It's like a fairly large effect. And you can observe it too in like the monthly sales data. People will buy for like 2 months or something, and then it just goes down because people are addicted and then they gotta quit. So I don't know. I guess I'm of the mind if you want to reduce access to criminals who are overwhelmingly deeply poor, deeply unable to get access not just to personal income but social resources, then making it more expensive is one way to do so. Yeah, and it is regressive. I
think it is. I think the issue with it though is twofold. One is that most gun policy does feel like it's just a band-aid, right? Because like the crime itself is happening for a reason. Like there's a very clear, everybody knows sociological reason for why it's happening. The two biggest reasons are lack of access to mental health care. Like in this country, I know people who literally can't afford therapy. Like, so it's like that is a thing in this country, is people cannot afford their therapy sessions. That is a problem. And then on top of that, I'll let you go, sorry.
No, just to speak to that, there was a study from North Carolina that when people 18 and a half get kicked off of Medicare, the rate of crime and arrests goes up, I think, 40%. So an additional 2% of people commit crimes after they get kicked off of Medicare if they have mental illnesses in North Carolina. Just like the lack of mental health care is really, really, really large impact on crime, is all. Like potentially 50% or so increase for people with mental health issues.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just the fact that, like, we know why crime happens. Like, obviously, most crime happens for 99.99% of the time for two reasons. Mental health issues and poverty issues. Like, issues with wealth disparity, poverty, and, like, socioeconomic issues. And we in America are very afraid of implementing any policies, any reformist policies that could help with those socioeconomic issues because we call it socialism. We get scared. We think it's too radical. I mean, even among Democratic voters, policies that are seen as, not radical enough because they're not what Bernie supports aren't even that popular among Democrat voters. Like, you'd think it'd be in the high 80s or 90s of the percents, but it's in this, high 60s and 70s for some of these policies, like single-payer healthcare programs. They're not as popular as people expect if they're that, like, steeped in left-wing media, even among Democrats. A lot of people spur up at anything that sounds like, empowering the welfare state, essentially. But those are the things we have to do to solve the crime that is the root of the problem. And I agree that, like, obviously we do not want criminals getting guns as it is, but it does feel like a lot of gun policy, or the Democrats advocating for it, is almost like a diversion away from we need to acknowledge the issues that are actually causing crime. Yeah.
Well, so to speak to that, sometimes I feel like I would agree with you. Some Democrats take an either or approach that, like, their solution to crime is we're going to get rid of the guns. We're going to do, like, some tiny Band-Aid solutions, but they're not going to do all of the solutions that get at the heart of crime. And then when I talk to some lefties, not you, some lefties will say something like, we should do the solutions that get to the heart of the crime. We should decriminalize all drugs. We should do Medicare for all. We should give everyone free mental health care. But they don't want to do any of the gun policies because they see the gun policies as regressive. Because for every imposition you make that makes it a little harder to get guns, those impositions will routinely fall more heavily on the poor. And I've always taken the argument that I see this as a both and situation, that there's no reason we can't do both. Like, if you do waiting periods, if you tax ammunition, if you tax guns, the overwhelming beneficiaries of both doing a, like, huge increase in the welfare state and of decreasing gun violence and gun deaths will be poor people, because the overwhelming victims of gun violence and gun deaths are poor people.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm fine with prices going up on guns. Like, as much as it pisses me off, and it's like, I do not like the political ramifications, as a safety policy, it's good. Like, and morally, I think it's fine. Guns are, there are cheap guns you can use for self-defense. Like, if you're worried about, like, say my mom, for instance, who was, as an example, very anti-gun. Literally, 4 months ago, she was so afraid of guns that when I tried to get her to hold an airsoft gun to show her how to hold one properly, she got scared, freaked out, and just said, I'm too stressed for this, I'm going to throw up. I can't. It's too much like holding a real gun. I've been shot at before. And it's like, okay. Then my birthday came around, my 24th birthday, and I begged her, please, let me take you to a range and shoot a gun for the first time. Just shoot one round. And if you want to leave, we can walk right out the door. I'll have wasted like $60, but it's fine. It'll have been worth it just for you to have done it and for you to be able to say you've done it and for your opinions to now be backed up by the experience of having done it. Mm-hmm. We go to the range. She shoots one round. I see her smile. and about 10 seconds later, the magazine was empty, and she was hooked. And that night, she was researching. It really was a wholesome experience. Like, we were actually able to bond over it because that night she was researching what guns she wanted to get. From, like, so terrified of guns, she would say she's gonna throw up when I tried to drill her on gun safety, the basic rules and everything. Colonel Cooper's 4 basic rules of gun safety. She would say she's gonna throw up from the nervousness of me talking about it, to, all right, let's put on some gun videos. I want you to put on a video about this gun I'm looking at. She ended up getting a Ruger EC9S, And she wanted to watch videos on whatever gun she wanted to get because, you know, you want to research that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, you want to see it going. No, I mean, so I get that. I think fear is a big motivator, especially for, like, I think that some of what's happening is you're seeing policy being drafted by upper middle class, educated Democratic legislators. And one of the things that we know from like the studies of bias in political parties is the Republican Party is overwhelmingly controlled by rich Republicans. The Democratic Party is overwhelmingly controlled by rich Democrats. And so that means the Democrats are usually pretty good on social issues, but also means that they're the type of people who may not have a lot of experience with guns. They might be completely fucking afraid of it, and the only experience they're seeing of it is coverage on the news. They're not like taking, I don't think, a super fact-based stats approach or whatever. So I think there's definitely truth there. I will say, conversely, though, there is a lot of evidence that Republican support for guns is itself also highly rooted in racism. Like, there's literally evidence that when you give a Republican a gun, they feel stronger, that the reason Republicans give for guns is that they feel unsafe. They talk about stuff like diversity and crime in their areas, and it always gets back to urban populations with a lot of winks and nudges. And like, I don't know, so to give a key example, like the arch libertarian, I think Ron Paul literally wrote a pamphlet back in the 80s or 90s on how to shoot someone and get away with it. And it was with specific reference to urban populations carjacking you. So I just think, I will just say, like, I think there's really bad motives on both sides. I'm doing a centrism here, that there's a lot of really uninformed approaches to guns overall.
Yeah.
I would actually, if I'll put one last note in it, I would even argue a lot of the a lot of the focus on self-defense is also fear. It's people who think that they can solve crime by themselves being armed, that their solution to an unsafe society is not to help out the people who would be criminals. It's not to solve the root of the problem. It's just to arm themselves and think that they can end violence themselves, an individual solution to a social problem driven by fear.
Yeah, I get what you mean by that. I can actually attest to that personally happening to me. So it was actually a really funny story. I don't want to divert too much, but I think it plays into a point that you're making, so I think you'll appreciate it. The other night, I went to bed happy as can be, and you know, I get a lot of death threats online, and I'm usually not too worried about it, but sometimes I hear a weird noise outside, or a bump, or a you know, rattle, and it makes me wonder, like, is there some motherfucker who's found out where I am and they're outside? You know, I get a little nervous about that kind of thing. So I go to bed, and I'm sleeping, and I have a dream. I have a dream that I have people, like, breaking into my house, that I hear, like, rocks breaking the window and, like, my front window, and I run out into the living room to see what's going on. Like, what happened? Did, like, a wind gust hit and break it? Like, I'm not, in my dream logic, I don't know what's happening yet. And I see that I'm getting, like, my house is getting broken into, and I, like, run into my room to get my gun, and it's not there. It's just gone. I can't find it. It's completely gone. No matter, like, it's not where it is, where it's supposed to be. It's not where it is in real life whenever I went to sleep, even though, you know, in my dream, I assume it should be there. And I start panicking, and I panic so much I wake up. I wake up, I go to my computer, I stroke my gun a little bit, like, okay, you're here, okay. And then, and then
Baby's here.
like, okay, you're all right. And then I go on Reddit. You know, I'm just bored. I drink some Monster. I scroll Reddit a minute. See a video come up. And it's captioned, "Ring doorbell footage of armed robbery in Seattle suburb." And I'm like, I live in a Seattle suburb. It was from the night before. Not that far from where I am. Like, I won't say how far because you can look this story up, but not that far. And the video footage is literally of 3 armed dudes in masks. They've all got handguns in their hands, and they start by walking up to the front door, and they yell, "Sheriff, police." That's what he yells. And it's like, okay, so already you've given away. You've already given. I don't think that's what a cop would say, and I don't think that's what most people would assume a cop would say. And then they start pounding on the door futilely. Like, the door is pretty tough, it looks like. They're not really getting in too well. Then they start readying their gun to shoot at the door. But right before they do, you start hearing gunshots from inside. and bullet holes, like you could see the holes forming in the door. No shots hit the guys that were attempting to rob the house, but they scared the guys off immediately and they ran away. And I think they got found, thankfully. But yeah, I immediately saw that and was like, wow, that was last night when I was having that dream. And yeah, I can see how, like, owning a gun definitely plays into people's heightened fear and awareness. But to be fair, to an extent, that is valuable. When I did my CWL class, something they really drill into you, because like they test you, they do have you do modules, and you have to pass with a certain percentage, or you don't pass and you don't get your license, and you wasted your money for the class. And then you have to go in person and do a live fire test. But for the test, what they teach you is that there's like different levels of alertness that you need to be at. There's like level white, which is like being completely unaware of your environment. It's like, you know, la-di-da-di-da, I don't know what's going on, I don't care what's going on. Someone could walk up behind me and put a knife to my throat right now and I wouldn't know, right? Yeah, code yellow, which is just being normally aware of your environment. You're looking around, you look behind your shoulder every, minute or so, make sure nothing weird's happening behind you. Just, if a weird-looking person, a shady-looking person walks by, you just kind of eye them down a little bit, make sure they know that you see them, and just being on top of stuff. And then you've got code orange, which is like, let's say there's a fight broken out in a store, and you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, all right, so like I need to remove myself from the situation. And then you got code red they teach you, which is like, okay, full emergency mode, I may have to pull my gun. This is for like when you're carrying, or even when you're not carrying, you can employ this. And what they teach you is that when things start to go into orange mode, remove yourself from the situation. The institution I got my concealed weapons license testing from was the USCCA. They represent people legally whenever they do a defensive shooting from, like, let's say the DA's like, I want to get you locked up for shooting the guy who tried to kill you in your house. Sometimes it happens. They'll defend you in court. And they don't want to have to defend you in court. They don't want to have to spend money on lawyers and shit. So they tell you to just remove yourself from the situation. If you can run, you run. Because if there was any scenario in which a reasonable person, that'll be the legal term, could have said that you didn't need to pull your gun and shoot for defensive lethal force, then you may be liable to at least a manslaughter charge. And, they teach you the last thing you ever want to do is even show your gun, certainly ever actually end up shooting it. You want to de-escalate things if you can't escape, but there's a lot of emphasis in the training on how to do things properly, and I wish everybody who owned a gun had to get that training, but they don't, especially not in Florida. I chose to get the concealed weapons license even though it's not needed, but most people now carrying a gun in their waistband in the state of Florida do not have that knowledge. They'll see a fight and they'll pull a gun to try to disarm, to calm things down because they think that's legal. I've seen Americans unironically comment on YouTube comments of videos of cops doing police brutality, talking like they unironically think you have the legal right to defend yourself against the cops. Like, there are tons.
I remember some lefties even making that argument that, like, why don't people simply resist the police? Why we have so many armed citizens? Why aren't they fighting back? And that's a great way to end up with a whole bunch of people in jail for life.
It's upsetting. It really is. Like, comply with the police, for God's sakes.
Well, I guess this is something I might want to, something that I maybe most disagreed with about your video on guns was the presentation of self-defense. And I think there's certainly cases, like you can find 100,000 anecdotes of people who used or say they used a gun in self-defense, like the one that you talked about, the video, and also your prophetic dream. I have to repeat from chat that someone called you Xanstradamus.
God, if I really never want to have to use my gun defensively. Like, I promise, there's so many people who have their Rambo or John Wick home defense fantasy, but I really never want to have to use that. I have nightmares about it, dude. Like, I actually have nightmares about it. It's not something I fantasize about.
Well,
but a lot of Americans do.
I totally agree. And this is, so if you go on like libertarian pages or whatever, they constantly fantasize about using their gun in self-defense. It's like it's like the oddest thing. Like what is it? Liberty Happy on Twitter or whatever. I know you can't follow him because
that dumb fuck.
But like, something like 1 in 20 of the memes he posts is about how cool it would be to kill a home invader. Like, Jesus Christ, dog.
Yeah.
I guess more generally, the argument that I want to give is that I think a lot of lefties adopt the conservative framing that you can actually defend yourself, that owning a gun does make you safer. And I want to say there's probably some instances, some people, like maybe some levels of celebrity, you might be at that level where there's enough of a risk of random stalkers, essentially, that like the gun might make you safer. But for the
for
average person, for like 99.999% of people, the average effect is to make you less safe. First, because you put yourself at risk due to self-harm. And second, because you put yourself at risk of harm from your intimate partner. But third, I guess the argument is that there's not really any causal evidence that owning a gun makes you, your family, your community, your state safer. Like states with more guns don't see less crime. States with more guns like the United States, countries with more guns like the United States don't see less violent crime. We just see more murder.
People aren't the only danger. Like, to be fair, people aren't the only danger. Like, America, you know, I've the one case in my life where I've ever been in a situation where if it didn't go the way it did, and if the only way for me to survive would have been to have a gun. And that was on my 19th birthday. I went on a camping trip in Florida. I went off into the woods to go piss. And I was looking down at my feet while walking through the woods, just very off in my own head. I look up, and 10 feet away from me is a bobcat.
Jesus.
A fucking bobcat. A big cat. A puma, if you will. There's lots of different names for them. It's just a big cat that you see in the woods that could kill you if it wanted to. Usually, when they see you before you see them, and if you see them, you're already dead. I somehow snuck up on this one, and I was so freaked out by seeing it, because I at first I thought it was a wolf, because its coat was very like grayish, like I thought it would be brown. So I always thought big cats were brown, and so I saw the gray, and the first thing I thought was wolf. The eyes and the gray and the poofiness in the face, just wolf is what came out to me at first. And so I screamed, "Oh fuck!" was what I screamed at the top of my lungs, like in that very deep bellowing, like it would have been a great sound clip. It was the loudest I've ever yelled in my life. Oh fuck! And the thing bolted away from me very quickly because I was so loud. And it was big. Yeah. It was large. It could have killed me. And I was not in like that much of the woods of Florida by any means. And Florida is like pretty low tier when it comes to things you need a gun to protect yourself from in terms of wildlife. Like bobcats tend to avoid you. I got really lucky just to see one. That experience in hindsight is actually a really lucky one. But it could have gone badly. Because I've played Red Dead Redemption 2. I know what those things can do to you. They're a one-hit kill in that game. Like, a bear is less deadly than those things in Red Dead Redemption 2. But on top of that, like, you go out into, like, Colorado, like, you're not dealing with little black bears anymore. That, like, you get into Colorado and where I live, and the bears are big. Like...
Yeah, they can destroy you.
Yeah, there's some big shit here. I know, like, definitely in Alaska, like... I think Alaskans are probably pretty, liable to have a gun. And, you know, even in Florida, there's a lot of sporting, right? Like, my uncle goes out on a little boat, he gets a license, and he goes out into the swamp with his Glock, and he gets a gator, like, he finds a big alligator with, like, a loop, gets it up to the surface, and shoots it in the head, and takes it home and butchers it, and a lot of people get to have gator.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, if you're talking about a loophole for okay, two scenarios: loophole just for people rural right now, and maybe like a long-term idea of how you want to design a society that, like, maybe some kind of farmers, people who live out in the middle of nowhere, and people who are going camping or whatever, that like they can you go to the people's camping equipment rental, okay, and one of the things you rent there is also the people's gun. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes total sense. I guess just like I guess I'm trying to speak to like most of the threats that people face, like the number of people that get killed by wildlife, I want to say is less than 1,000 a year.
Yeah, it's not much. Like heart attacks are way worse.
The main threat from guns is other people. And so like I think making carve outs for rural or survival situations, that makes total sense. But like I guess just to bring it back to like self-defense against other people, who are usually less dangerous than pumas, but with guns probably have a higher kill rate than a puma. There's just like like when you look at the evidence on this, the claim. So like in your video, you mentioned that there are 1.67 million defensive shootings in a year, and first off, that's
Or
the
sorry,
number
I
of
misspoke there. That's
Yeah.
uses of a firearm. So technically, not a shooting, but like, say someone might have gotten mugged, but they showed they had a gun on them, and the guy like was like, "Never mind," and ran away. Like that
Yeah.
would count in the statistic. Which
Yeah,
you
so
know, fair enough.
Well, and to be clear, it's more general. Just the defensive use of a gun, self-defensive gun use is defined as any time that a person like drew or made clear they had a gun. In the surveys, when like Kleck, the guy that I was talking about earlier, that arch conservative election denier, the surveys that he asks people is just, did you basically in any way, not even shooting it, use your gun to defend yourself? And that's how you get to the 1.67 million number. I just wanted to say that number is like impossible. So like there's like a long debate here between Kleck and like the most of the rest of the research, and there's a few other studies like Kleck. But basically the problem is these are surveys of the general public, and how do you get 1.67 million defensive gun uses? Well, all you need to do is get 0.5% of Americans to say they use their gun defensively in the last year. It's not hard to see how that could happen from people unintentionally thinking that they use their gun defensively, even though someone else thought it was offensive, like using it to say end one of those arguments you were talking about. Someone else could easily perceive that as someone was threatening me with a gun. Some of it might just be people misperceiving situations, and some of it might be people lying or answering the survey incorrectly. When we look at surveys of crime victims, the number of estimated defensive uses is way smaller. Like in Hemingway and Solnick 2015, who used the National Crime Victims Survey, just 0.9% of crimes with a victim had defensive gun use, which is way lower than what you'd expect. Like 1 in 3 Americans own a gun directly, and about 40% of Americans, I think, have a gun in their household.
Well, that
so it's
that
like,
also adds to the thing that most of these crimes happen between people who know each other and are more likely to target someone who doesn't have a gun and can't defend themselves. There's that argument one could make, but at the same time, I agree with you overall. I'm way more willing, like as a gun owner, to sacrifice in order to be part of the solution than I think most are. My big issue is that I feel as though the problem primarily is illegal gun ownership. That's like the core issue we want to get to, because a lot of crime is committed with illegally owned guns. Whether it, like, the guns themselves existing is not illegal, it's the people who have them having them that is illegal. They obtained them not through legal means. They did not go to a gun store, a licensed FFL, get the background check, do the waiting period. They did not do that. They got it from someone who maybe did, or like it's usually a resale, a straw sale, or what is it called? A straw sale? Is that the term? I think that's the term for it. Straw sale.
purchase.
Straw purchase. Thank you. Yeah, I had the terminology a little off.
It might be a straw sale for the other guy, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And you know, people also bring up the gun show loophole, which is not really a loophole so much as just the way that the law works. Essentially, the gun show loophole, just to inform people that keep bringing it up in the comments, is literally just when, let's say there's a gun show. The biggest one in the country is SHOT Show. It happens every year. Let's say you go to SHOT Show. At a gun show, legally, only licensed dealers there are allowed to sell guns. You can't buy from anybody else. You have to go through the background check process and all that stuff. But as long as it's not one of those guns that was banned by the 1990s assault weapons ban, you can totally do a private sale of a gun without any paperwork or anything like that. In most states. Not all of them, but in most states. The thing is, you can't do it on the property of the gun show because you're not a licensed seller. And if you were, you would have to do the whole paperwork thing. And so gun owners bring a ton of guns to gun shows, and they bring them with the intention of trading and selling to other gun owners in the parking lot. So it's basically outside of any given gun show is like a big tailgating, like festival of people trading and selling their guns completely legally outside of the gun show's grounds. That is the gun show loophole. And so that's a pretty common way of doing things as well, because no background checks are needed unless it's one of those
Sure.
things there. And of course, at the end of the day, when it comes to these things, the enforcement of these laws only really gets to apply whenever the police get involved anyway. Someone can have tons of illegal guns stowed in their house, but if they never commit a crime with them or do anything like get caught by the police with them until they commit the crime,
Yeah, they're not getting raided,
the crime,
right? The cops aren't checking the serial numbers.
Yeah, because they aren't getting checked by anything, right? There's no, the guns don't have a magic tracking device on them. Most of the things you can do can only be done once the gun, preemptively or postemptively after the crime has been committed, as a way of investigating which gun committed the crime and who had the gun, and tracing it back to somebody. So it's more of a hindsight thing, these measures. Regardless, though, I do take issue with it.
No, I mean, to speak to that real briefly, something you suggested earlier was a national registry. And if guns are registered to a given owner, then it means that those types of sales, which you might not allow because you don't register them in some way or other, would be de facto disallowed. Yeah, so it would make not only the purchase of the gun, but the seller of the gun liable in a pretty easy way if you had a registry. So
the only reason why I'd be against the banning of the private sales right now is because the assault weapons ban. If they just heavily regulatedly, because things being legal means more regulation, and that's typically going to result in when you ban things, you create a black market for it. There's going to be a market for it, and people want to fulfill it. And right now, my understanding is probably the number one fulfiller of that market would probably be many different world powers and groups funneling weapons through Mexico. And the people getting them through Mexico are bringing drugs and no doubt guns, and they have resources that are extravagant. They've got planes, they got submarines, they got bought out people on the border and police and military that'll let them through. So that's probably going to be a problem until
we're actually
get Mexico.
We're a net supplier of guns to Mexico because of how much cheaper the guns are here.
We
and how strict the laws are there.
We export a lot, but I know that a lot of countries that import guns here illegally go through Mexico. It's probably it doesn't do, as you said, it's not it doesn't outnumber the amount that are heading out of the country. But yeah, we export a lot of guns because they are pretty cheap compared to other countries here. Yeah, but they're still pretty expensive. God, they are.
To speak to that a little bit, the number one source for illegal guns is stolen guns. It's that, so most home break-ins, something like 3/4 of them, the person isn't home or they're asleep and they don't report it till the next day. And those are a huge source of guns. In fact, some criminals actually target places with guns because guns are a great way to get basically liquid money on if you want to sell it for cheap. If you want to trade things for drugs, or if you just want to have personal protection.
A lot of them are guns that gun owners keep in their cars or trucks, usually trucks. And you know what they have on their car? A big old bumper sticker indicating they're a big old 2A supporter. I want to steal a gun. What car will I break into? Yeah, that's a lot of stolen guns out there.
Just to put a number to it, the number of estimated stolen guns per year is on the order of 300,000 to 500,000. And I think the number of guns sold each year is around 1 million. So we're just talking about a huge circulation of stolen guns. And I guess the follow-up question, one more restrictive SDL policy, I wondered if you'd agreed with, would be the mandatory gun safe proposals, that everyone who has a gun also has to buy a gun safe. So you're on the registry, and you also therefore need to be on the registry for buying. Zan's giving me the thumbs up. Yeah, so mandatory gun safe seems like an obvious solution to really cut down on stolen guns.
Yeah, I'm home all the time because of my lifestyle and don't have any children or other people in my home, so I currently don't have one. It's also a bit of an expenditure, but I plan to get one, especially because, holy fuck, are they not that expensive? I'm talking a Gettysburg, taller than you or me, fucking safe, as bigger than any person you've ever seen. Huge amount of space, literally a maybe 4-inch thick steel for $650. That's a lot of money. It's also how much I got my Glock for. Yeah. So it's for the top of the line, top of the line, most expensive, insane, extravagant, not unless you're going for the custom made John Wick gun safe, the most expensive gun safe is as much as a Glock 19. So Yeah, you can afford to get a safe. I'm fine with those laws that mandate it. So many kids getting their hands on guns, and it's just,
It's
it's so fucked.
kids, it's theft, and also it's the suicide too, making it harder to get in. If you have any kind of locking on it or whatever, it just makes it
Yeah.
one step harder. So like to give you an idea of how much you can affect self-harm, you know how a lot of painkillers, they're in those bubble wraps, and it's really annoying to pop them out. You have to do each one, and it takes like 5 seconds each.
It keeps
Those
people from
reduce
ODing.
It literally
Yeah.
keeps you from ODing because it's so fucking annoying to get them all out. And like unironically, I believe there was a study in Britain when they did that reduced national suicide rate by like 5%. Like it's so way more than you'd think, just to make things a tiny bit more annoying for people to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And I guess just something that I maybe is an argument here. I'm totally in favor of really high taxes on guns. Something you could do to make it easier for people to afford guns who are poor is plow those taxes right back into subsidies for gun safes. So the gun might be more expensive, but maybe the safe is free for everyone. Also to encourage the fucking 150 million people with guns in their houses to buy one. Because Jesus Christ, there's so many out there.
I think that the law could accommodate cheaper options. There are like my case, for example, is like indestructible. Like there's no one could get into it. It's practically a safe. It could be stolen, but good luck getting into it. And I also have my phone number and name on it too. But the case itself is hard, like that hard fucking like OtterBox plastic. I mean, the TSA took hatchets to it and it survived just fine. And it has like solid padlocks on it, so it could theoretically be broken with like bolt cutters or whatever, but it's pretty secure, and that's what I keep it in, but unlocked because I need to be able to get it to it at a moment's notice when I'm at home. But like when I leave the house, I lock it up, and I'm hopefully in a couple days should be receiving my concealed pistol license for Washington, so I'll be able to conceal carry in the state. But like I don't expect anything to happen, but for my position, yeah, I think I'm at higher risk than the usual person to be in a position where I might need to use it to defend myself legitimately.
Well,
as
that's
you were
kind
saying
of
before.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was going to come back to what we were saying before about safes. I'm fine with making guns a somewhat unattainable hobby for people who aren't as wealthy. Like, outside of buying, like, a cheap gun that you can use to defend yourself, I was mentioning this before, but got stunlocked with a story about my mom. Like, my mom just wanted a gun.
It was a good story.
Yeah, it was a wholesome story. My mom just wanted a gun that would be useful for her to grab out from her dresser or under her pillow if she woke up in the middle of the night to find someone broke into her house and was on top of her, and she needed to be able to defend herself. Just a short little Ruger. Very small gun. Isn't super accurate, but at any short range, it'll get the job done, for sure. And, you know, that's just what she wanted because that's what was most useful for her in what seemed like the most useful scenario. And besides, like, there are cheap guns. That gun was really cheap. It was like $250, which is pretty cheap for a gun, and that will do the job. That will protect you. The case will protect your family from getting into it and will protect it from getting stolen within pretty solid reason, on top of hiding it. And you can get a gun safe down the road after saving some money. That's reasonable. However, like, when it comes to more expensive guns, like, guns are an expensive hobby, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with there being guns I will never be able to afford. They're expensive machinery, they're expensive equipment, and I don't think anybody needs to have a gun. Like, I don't think anybody needs to have a fancy gun. Like, if some people need to have a gun that gets the job done, not everybody needs to have, like, a high point or something, right? Like, not everybody needs to have, like, the top tier pistol or an AR-15, but, you know, having a shotgun for home defense that shoots birdshot is reasonable. Having, like, a rifle for hunting is reasonable. And I think there being, like, a lower price option for those things, for those very reasonable entry things is cool. But overall, guns and ammo being expensive and not the kind of thing, like, the kind of thing that, like, you know, you might have to put a bit of money in is fine. Because as much as I hate to, you know, kind of profile a bit, lower income people are more likely to use said gun for a crime, even if obtained legally down the road. So, like, if it is a more expensive to enter hobby, then, like you said with cigarettes, it's going to reduce gun ownership, which means less guns getting stolen and less gun suicides. And yeah, I think that's fine.
Well, it's reducing gun ownership, but it's also, like you say, it's reducing gun ownership, particularly in. So, just for reference, 75% of homicides occur before men reach 30. That's like the demographic. That when they buy a gun, there's a risk there, and a lot of the rest is intimate partner homicide. So, like, the reason why the cost of guns matters so much is that men 18 to 25 are not particularly rich usually, and the people who are particularly rich are not usually at high risk of violent crime. So like that's the argument in part for higher age limits. Like I don't know, I could argue for like 25 or something. By that point, I think something like 60.
25's good.
Yeah, something like 25 to, I don't know, maybe 30 or something, but somewhere in that range would be my ideal. And the price then makes it so that it's harder for people who are trying to get in to do so. But I think like the argument would be like you would be taxing things. I saw some people getting mad in chat that this is going to screw the poor over, get them out of getting guns to get self-defense. And I think the argument is what you might want to do is tax the guns even to quite a significant degree, but you're using that to pay for stuff like gun safes, and you're using that to fund the gun safety measures on the other end. So
particularly requirements for training.
Yep, it'd be like that should be free.
Yeah,
but funded by gun sales.
Funded by the taxes from the gun sales and the ammo sales. Yes, I completely agree with that. I have literally no problem with these policies. I guess the one thing I wonder if we agree on is, do you disagree with like policies that just outright ban certain guns, with exceptions to things like Glock switches? I think those are just really dangerous, and most people who use them are just using them and getting themselves hurt or to show off on TikTok.
At the start of this conversation, I suggested that a handgun ban might be an appropriate argument to make. That because they're cheap, because they're easily concealable, they are overwhelmingly used in crime. I don't know much. I actually don't know anything about Glock switches, so I can't speak to that. But I might be okay with a categorical ban on handguns, like very short, very small guns.
Can I? Do you mind if we do a little aside to show you what a Glock switch is? Because it's relevant. It's going to be like a main, like it's sort of like a newish thing in the gun world. Some media like sites are picking up on it, but holy shit, Google's listening to us. A video just came up on my YouTube, recommended the Vosh Pit, the Gun Talk Stun Lock.
Oh like no!
The rhyme.
Of course he knows.
Well, and also Google is listening to us. Holy shit.
Well, that's nothing. Look,
it does.
NSA agent, Google agent. I salute them. Strongest soldiers of the anti-privacy crusade. Okay.
My private FBI agent knows my balls better than I do.
So true.
Anyway, I was gonna bring this up. Hold on. Glock switch. So I know a lot about Glocks in particular because that's the handgun I have. And I did a lot of research about it before I got it, and I wanted to make sure I got the right choice. The switch is a little piece of metal you put onto. I mean, let me get mine really fast so I can compare to the video here and show you guys like what the addition is to this. All right, you guys can see it's all empty. All right, so basically, you see the back of the gun here? It's not very well lit. Hold on. You see the back of the gun here? It's gonna light up in just a second.
Warming up.
There we go. There's the light. The light turns off and then back on. It's one of those shitty Elgato lights. Anyway, so basically this little area right here on a non-modified Glock 19 or any type of Glock will look like this. So this little, just flat little area, and you see this little bump, like puzzle piece looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it always looks like that.
It's a little hard to see on camera, but yes, I know what you're pointing at.
So with a Glock with a switch on it, they stick a little piece of metal into that spot, and it allows it to go full auto. Now this is a Glock 19, I believe, with a switch on it and an extended magazine. And this is what it is capable of. Get ready to see some shit that should really be banned.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, that's what a switch is. That's what it
That
does
one
to a
might
Glock.
actually be able to blow out the lung of a body. Just gotta hit all 20 in the lung.
Yeah. Holy shit. Yeah, for sure. Oh god, now I have to. So here's a good time to talk about one of the reasons why a lot of gun owners are a little pissy about some gun policy Democrats tend to pass, such as in here in Washington. We've got a ban on magazines with a capacity over 10 rounds. This entailed for me when I was in Florida, and I bought this gun. It came with three, in the box, it came with three 15-round magazines, which is standard for a Glock 19. And I had to throw those away before I left for the airport. I had to just throw them in the trash. Because, like, I'm not keeping, like, gun stuff in my house while I'm away for several months. And, like back in Florida, my parents' house. And so, because it's just going to be left there unattended. And I know it's just magazines, but it still felt wrong to me, you know what I mean? Like, what if they're used? What if they're stolen and used for a crime? I would feel liable. And so, like, I just threw them away. And I had to come to Washington and buy whole new magazines. Only 10, they were 10-round ones. Literally $30 per mag. $30 per mag. I probably could have gotten a better price somewhere else, but that was the closest place to me. $30 per new magazine. And you know, that's pretty rough. And on top of that, these can hold up to 10 rounds if you're strong enough. I had to clear a round out of the chamber there to show it was safe, so now I gotta put that round back in, and it is hell to get that 10th round back in. Realistically, when you're at the range after you've loaded this thing once, you've only got,
you don't
like,
fully load it, right?
You've got a 7-round magazine. You got a 6-round magazine. Eventually, you're just loading rounds into the chamber. Like, I eventually get to the point where my fingers are so numb, I just lock the slide back and drop a round in the chamber, and then let the slide go forward, fire a shot, lock the slide back, put a round in, and just have it be a one-shot pistol.
World's laziest gun streamer.
No,
I completely get it. No, your thumbs hurt, right?
I bring a lot of ammo to the range for a lot of, like, I plan to be at the range for a while. I want to get my practice in. So after loading a lot of magazines, my fingers are fucked, dude. Like, after a while, if I want to keep shooting, I've just got to start dropping magazines, or not magazines, dropping rounds into the chamber. Otherwise, my fingers are just going to fall off. And it's getting colder, too, and I like to shoot outdoors. My fingers are going to be so freezing.
You got to get those, like... You got to start becoming. This is the biker Zan arc. You need like the finger tipless gloves or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what yeah.
Those feel like they defeat the purpose, though, right? Like, you do get the additional, like, ability to have the dexterity of your fingers, but I feel like your fingertips will have isolated freezingness on them, you know? I've never used them before, but yeah.
It's your blood heats them up way more than you think. It's like how you can wear, if you put on like 10 t-shirts, your arms heat up way more than you'd think. I don't know why 10, but like if you put a bunch of t-shirts on, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that. You are right. I mean, I just didn't figure that the gloves would typically be enough. Maybe it just depends on the temperature. But yeah, I'll have to try it out. But I mean, I think overall we agree on most of these things. My biggest hangups are really...
Probably handgun ban. Not a fan of that, I'm betting, but...
Not a ban, but I mean, like, I want the legal acquiring of the guns to be so stringent that the idea of those guns becoming a problem is unthinkable. Like, the amount of, like, standards I am willing to set for it to be difficult to legally obtain a gun are, like, Canada level, pretty much. As long as we're not outright banning the ownership of certain guns, I would honestly prefer if you had to get licensed. If you had to, like, pretty much do the CWL process, but even more hardcore, even more standards you have to meet, even more stringent guidelines, like the daily background checks on that list that you have to do in Canada if you're a gun owner. My real only issue is when it comes down to, hey, you're a legal gun owner, you've gone through all the hoops and all the trials we say you have to go through to confirm that you're legally owning a gun, you still can't own the really fun ones, though. That's really where it comes down to me being upset. And then the other big thing is Democrat policy, which I can elaborate on further in a second.
No, I mean, your video showed lots of Dems making really dumb statements. And I've seen a lot of the Joe Biden statements. And Joe Biden has... like he and Obama have made a lot of really bad arguments about guns. Like I completely agree. I guess the I will totally agree that that stuff comes off as tone deaf and ignorant to a lot of gun owners, and that probably does help sink democratic gun policies. Um, um, I, I guess I don't know the way out of that one. So like one of the things that I'd say as well is I often cited for years I cited these studies showing that gun control policies are actually pretty popular. But one of the things that I've come to learn is that referendums on gun control have done really poorly, like something to the tune of 20 points worse than polling. And so that suggests that the polling is not indicative of what people actually think, that support for guns is like way higher than it appears in the polls. And so I will say maybe at the end of all this that like, even though I feel pretty strongly that like household gun ownership, cheap gun ownership, lack of safes, buying guns when you're young, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these are really big problems, and they do really increase violence in this country. That we might have like even a third less homicides, half as many homicides, if we had something like Canada's level of system of gun ownership. That it might just not be politically feasible right now. That like, I will maybe agree with all that. That like, we have sort of shot ourselves in the foot, and it's sort of unworkable in general.
Yeah, like I'm actually skimming over the article right now on the shooting right now that happened in Maine. Definitely an AR-15. I can just tell by the blurry CCTV footage. He's got some kind of scope on there and maybe an underbarrel flashlight or some kind of like lighting attachment, and that looks like a probably double magazine. So lots like he's using like the classic media frenzy mass shooter gun. So there's going to be a lot of media frenzy about this shooting for sure. And he's on the loose. They're looking for him. They're reporting he's armed and extremely dangerous and on the loose. Like yeah, he is a person of interest and should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. And his name is Robert Card. Robert Card. Yeah, they haven't caught him yet. Yeah, he just straight up got away. Holy shit. He's an older looking guy. He is 40 years old.
He's the 1% of murders after age 40 or whatever.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, I so one of the things that's frustrating is like
planned attack for sure.
Given that I believe there were multiple sites as well, this might have been a pre-planned thing as well. And those are the sort of thing that even well-crafted gun policy really can't stop. And there's no world in which we get enough guns away that someone could not get one to plan out something. It might just make fewer people able to do so. But I guess one of the questions that I had is like, do you think there's a world in which, okay, let's say I get my way and we've got the community armories, you've got some sort of like the people's armory, you've got the people's gun ranges. Do you think that in a world like that, there might be less demand for the sort of semi-automatic, the assault rifle type guns? That if people could go to the range and have easy access to those, maybe with full magazines, like you're getting so mad about, and you're like your thumbs are complaining about, that people might not buy them for personal use.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting case to be made about like the usefulness of them for personal use. Like an AR-15 is pretty useful for defending your home, to be fair. Like I know it seems overkill, but like the AR-15 is a civilian made or civilian customized model of the M4, I believe. So it doesn't do full auto. Like AR-15s don't do full auto. They're not made for it. They're made for like legally compliant post 1990s assault weapons ban. The thing they have is the high magazine capacity and the relatively high fire rate if you can just go bang, 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 bang with your finger really fast. Basically, it shoots as fast as your finger can. That's why bump stocks are a modification that are a worry, because they just make the trigger go faster, because that's all that you need to make it go full auto effectively, right? So, like, yeah, it's definitely a concern. I think that most people who like those guns just want to be able to shoot them. And you can really, in America, unless you own property, and we're talking a really small percentage of people who have the property or the like facilities on hand at any given time that they from home can just go outside and shoot guns. There's a fair amount in rural areas, and I know people who do that, but it's a pretty small percentage of gun owners, I would bet. And with that in mind, relegating that type of gun the like machine guns and what have you to designated safe ranges and whatnot, and just it being like, oh, you rent it there, right? Like I have a gun range that I go to and rent guns from, and it's a very reasonable price too. You just have to buy their ammo. If you shoot that ammo, if you shoot ammo through their guns, you have to buy their ammo because of liability reasons. They don't want you shooting dirty, shitty ammo through their guns. So with that in mind, they that wouldn't be a bad program in my opinion. I don't think people necessarily need to own an AK or own an AR-15 or own an AK-40 or a what was I gonna say, like a saw, for example. Holy shit. Like, as cool as it would be for me to own that, like, if I could own those things, I would want to own them in a heartbeat. But that's sort of my selfish impulse to want to own a cool toy and have it for myself. But if it was at least possible for everyone to have access to it, that would be nice, especially if it's in a safe environment. And that's kind of what Vegas has right now. Like, you can go to Vegas and shoot an AK. So that's nice, at least.
Yeah, I heard someone in chat talking about how there's insanely cool shit you can shoot in Vegas. Well, actually, okay, have you ever heard the term library socialism before? Have I ever yelled it at you?
I think I've heard it from you before, yes.
The general idea is one way that you might try and make property more accessible to everyone is having everything operate a bit like a library. You don't need to own a book if you can go to the library and get it, or if you can check it out in an online library. In fact, a lot of libraries nowadays are starting to do stuff like Netflix, where you can rent out X many movies per month or whatever. And I think that shit is great. That means there's like a centralized buyer of all the content. You're not putting the limits on the individual person, which is regressive. It makes everyone pay something to get access to it. So what if instead of you owning things personally, like a gun, you went to the library and got it? What if instead of like having to own your own camping equipment, there was just a library right next to the camping site where you could rent it? The people's camping equipment and whatnot. The people's gun library. That's sort of the utopia, I guess, in my vision, that like you have your toys, but you don't need to buy them. You just check them out. You check out your gun toy, you check out your camping toy, you check out your actual toys for the people.
This is going to sound so off topic, but I promise you it's related, and it may make you want to get into this if you haven't already. Have you seen The Walking Dead?
I have, but it was like 5 years ago. I don't remember it at all.
You're an early fall off. I get it. The show was the biggest show on TV for quite some time, but then kind of there was a season or two where it kind of took a downturn in the writing. Then it really came back. So, but the thing is, like, once a show kind of loses its like big, like globe dominating popularity, it can't get it back no matter how good it gets again. It's just one of those things. But it's maintained a pretty good audience, and the spin-offs they've done have been phenomenal, especially the new one in France with Daryl Dixon, but that's besides the point. In The Walking Dead, at one point they end up founding a community called Alexandria. And this is like their community with walls and everything that they survive in for several seasons. As a matter of fact, one of the characters who runs the place ends up saying about it, looks like the communist one after all. Because they're literally a commune. And one of the things they have is their armory. Because it's the zombie apocalypse, they need to carry guns, they need to have weapons, but also they need to maintain the peace, right? And so they've got an armory. And you rent out and check out guns and you check out ammo. And while you do carry it on yourself, especially outside the walls and while you're out for the day, eventually, like after like, I think it was like 2 or 3 days, you had to turn the gun in along with the ammo, and you had to like turn in the casings too. And they had a whole system for making sure they were tracking like bullets. They were tracking who had guns, and you could only have them for a certain amount of time. Then you had to come and exchange it for a new gun so that the guns were always being kept track of and everything. A system like that on a small scale, it works really fucking well. And it works in The Walking Dead. If it works in The Walking Dead, it'll work in real life, okay?
But
in all seriousness,
I completely trust The Walking Dead political theory.
But in all seriousness, though, that's a really good depiction of the idea that you're suggesting. Granted, it's in a post-apocalyptic world and in a small community of like 80 people, but like it could be scaled up. I mean, the more money you put into it, the more robust the system can be, right? So I can see that working.
Well, and I think one of the supplementary arguments here is that like America has seen just a total collapse of its institutions, that in part because we've gotten more secular, in part because unions have died, in part because political parties have gotten hollowed out. There's a dozen reasons. Communities and organizations that bind people have just gone the wayside. One of the things that I like, one of the socialist visions for me is trying to make people social. We're putting the social back in socialism. So like one of the things the Soviets did, that like genuinely very good at the Soviets, was they super funded sports leagues. They super funded all these like all these local grouping activities for people to go and do shit. And those worked. People formed communities based on like going to the local park and just playing sports together. People formed clubs based on playing chess together. That's part of the reason that the sport exists like to such a degree in Russia. And like I would love to see people who don't own a gun maybe as a personal hobby, but as a communal hobby. It's the same sort of argument for like it'd be better to have people drink in bars than have them drink alone type stuff. I don't know.
No, I
simply want people to touch
that.
grass. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Shooting clubs are great, like as an example of how you can kind of achieve that vision, how things currently are, like if you want to get that feel for yourself. Like, shooting clubs can be nice, and depending on where you are, just shooting ranges can be, like... I think a lot of people, when they assume what the clientele of a shooting range will be like, what are the other people who are holding guns on the range with me going to be like? And I think there's a very stereotypical imagination of what, or like idea of what you're going to imagine. I live in Seattle, so maybe it's different depending on where you are, and I'm sure it is, but like, I'm gonna be honest, when I go to the range here in Seattle, I expected it to be like the rednecks of the area, right? Like the country bumpkin redneck types of the area would be at the range shooting. But no, there were people like that there, and there were also like the try-hard, like tactical guys with their vests and their gloves and their like combat boots on, like all dressed to the like all up for training for God knows what. But most of the people that came in there, and when I say most, I mean most, were tourists. And a lot of them, like, I ended up talking to a group of them that were tourists from Japan, but a lot of them were tourists from Asian countries, and that was unironically the majority of people in there were tourists from Asian countries who came to America to shoot a gun. Whenever they told me we came to America on our trip, and one of the things we had on our list that we had to do was shoot a gun, and I was like, welcome home.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this is one of those nice things that like, I don't know, it is to some degree a sign of freedom that you like, that you trust people to some degree to be able to go to range, give them a gun, and they don't like run out and go just randomly shooting people or whatever. It is nice to see. It's clearly something that attracts people to the country, like part of a broader spirit of being able to say what you want, do what you want. So yeah, I mean, I think that shit's attractive. I love that.
It's cool. It gives America that rugged feeling that other countries have never been able to have. Like America,
we've lost the soy boy.
Yeah, you know, we're like the least soy of countries, you know? Like people are trying to claim we're becoming soy, but America will always be the most giga Chad of nations. But the funny thing as well is that the example, like what you said there about how it builds that camaraderie and you feel that trust, is even more so at outdoor ranges on public land. So here in Washington, there's a lot of woods, and you have to get a public like park pass for this, but you can go to land such as the public land such as the Triangle Pit, which are like designated shooting range areas in a quarry, and there's no range officers. There's no like, you just pull your car up, get your gun, go up to the big line of logs, and set up your target whenever people all unanimously yell cold range, ceasefire. And you've set up your targets, and when people start running back in and you know they're about to start yelling hot range, you run in too, and you start shooting. And you know, it works itself out, you know, like people generally go about things pretty well. There's been some cases I've seen on Reddit where people talk about the range and people like muzzle sweeping people and you know, just having issues shooting when it's a cold range, stuff like that. And that ends up causing a problem, but usually if someone pulls that shit, they get kicked out. Everyone's like, get the fuck out of here. So that's nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess just like there is a real value of that's more like people treating each other like people, but even just for stuff like if you go to a range routinely, or if you have a club tied to that you're not just doing it, you're not just being kind to some stranger, that's someone you know, someone you've built connections with, and someone that can maybe help you like beyond the range, I guess is the idea. And you know, you hear stories from that all the time. Like, I don't know, shit's good.
I completely agree. I think that some of your policies are a little more strict, or some of your policies are a little more strict than others. But I guess the final thing that I'd like to talk about is that I want to, if I can do anything, as you mentioned before, like the polls don't seem to represent how popular gun policy is accurately, or how popular guns are in America accurately. It seems like guns are just a lot more popular than you would think based on what the popularity of gun control policy is. And so with that in mind, Democrats' rhetoric around guns is concerning, and if I can do anything, it would be to use my power and my platform to speak with high-up Democrats just simply about guns. Like, can I have, like, a 30-minute conversation with you, like, one-on-one about guns? Like, everything from policy to their function. You can ask me any questions. I will, like, just basically, like, do my lecture, and I just want you to make your policy making from here on out with that knowledge. And I know a lot of it isn't based on what they know, but instead, like, what they want to make their constituents happy. But obviously, a lot of Americans would vote Democrat if it weren't for guns. Like, I'm gonna be real. Guns are they're the only real issue that Republicans have. In reality.
I would disagree on that. Just that, like, I think that Republican approaches to guns are much more like the constitutional carry type stuff. Like, their policies are so bad that even if I think that some Democrats use bad rhetoric, they focus their policies in the wrong way. They're focused on fear. They're not focused on like real solutions. Like, I would love to see more Democrats talking about mandatory safes. I would love to see more Democrats talking about like as you're saying, more training, longer waiting periods. But the difference is so stark. Like I think Missouri, for example, removed its permits to purchase, and it saw like a 10% increase in homicide over the next decade. Like, it's really bad in Republican states. They're not just like continuing whatever the American policy was; they're actively making it worse. So I don't know. I'm still rootin' tootin' for what's his face. Oh my God, what's the Texas governor guy? Beto O'Rourke. Okay, I'm rooting and tooting for Beto O'Rourke with my non-guns.
Well, I mean, what I hope for is that I want Democrats to, like, recognize things such as, like, the fact that pistols are the big issue. Handguns are the real, like, cause of all the violent crime that you're seeing with guns. I feel like a lot of it is based out of, like, the actual like, politicians themselves lacking knowledge on guns and, like, gun policy, or not gun policy, but gun violence statistics and gun functionality. The biggest thing is simply lacking knowledge on gun functionality. When it comes to guns, there's not a lot of subjectivity to their function. They very much are just solid pieces of plastic and metal, as I like to say. There is no subjectivity to how they function. This thing just does what it is advertised to do. You can modify it, but when you're modifying it, you're doing things to make it do a different thing. What it can do is what it can do. And when a Democrat falsely states a very common misconception, or even just a bizarre, out-of-this-world misconception about guns, it just really, really throws off a lot of people, and it just spurs so many of these gun content creators to make shitloads of content on nothing but how off the Democrats are. And as much as most of their content can be like, you know, like subjective opinion-based stuff, like, oh, gun control is bad because of this and that, when they can make a video debunking a Democrat when they claim a gun can do something it can't, or can do something that it, or can't do something that it can, I feel like it hits a lot harder. It's like, for once, the right actually does have a point on this one. It not in the whole overarching argument they're trying to make, but in that one little niche situation, which is all that really matters when that video gets millions of views. They can get a decisive gotcha that is factually correct. And it's like, oh, that hurts. As a lefty, it hurts to watch. I want the Democrats to be better.
I think that's totally fair, and I think that like some of what you advocate, so for shifting from the scary guns towards like certain policy-based solutions would help to cut down on that, because you don't need to know how a gun fires if you stop talking about like the bump stocks and all of the various like the high capacity magazines. If you just talk instead about stuff like the waiting periods, if you talk about stuff like the safes, you don't need to know how a gun how a gun works to know that it goes in the safe. You don't need to know how a gun works to say you should wait longer to get it. So it just gives less chances for classic Dem fuck ups, for Joe Biden moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
Someone in your chat did mention, they said that you said about 20 minutes ago that the segment would be ending. I'm not trying to keep you on if you're,
I don't know if I
trying to
said
get
that.
off.
I don't know if I
That
said
might
that
have
it
been
would
a
be
lie.
ending soon. Yeah, I think they were lying. I think I might have been talking about the other segment that I was doing before this that I said was going to end, but yeah, I'll probably have to end stream after our convo without doing FF14 because I got like very sucked up into
Shit,
this.
I'm
But
so
I
sorry.
enjoy. No, it's fine. I love having an excuse to talk about guns on stream. Honestly, it's fun. I enjoy it, and this will be a fun segment. I think people who are into me that do like guns will like it. Cherry asked me, can you ask SocDoneLeft when is he going to do the skeleton essay stream on speaker Mike Johnson?
I was gonna stream tomorrow, probably talking about Mike Johnson. I don't know if you covered Mike Johnson. I wasn't able to watch your full stream. The new Republican speaker.
Oh, I haven't yet. I'm like relatively without Twitter. I am so blind on everything until people are like, "Hey, did you hear massive fucking thing happen in politics?" I'm like, okay, I'm a politics.
Totally fair.
I do politics for a living. Is it like against the rules for me not to have known?
No, I think that's totally fair. And on days when I'm not on Twitter, the exact same thing happens. The House Republicans finally selected a speaker, and he's a fucking psycho. He was one of the people who argued in Texas v. Johnson to keep gay marriage illegal, just as an idea. That's how he started out back in like 2003. He and his wife are married in a covenant marriage, which means that you can't get divorced without going into mandatory counseling beforehand, plus several other steps. And he advocates that to become more popular. He's like, you go down the list, he's a theocrat, like, he is the worst in every possible issue in every way.
God, what a demon. Ugh. Yeah, I'm excited to see your coverage on him then. Yeah,
So
if
true.
you could DM it to me whenever it goes up, then I'll check it out because I'm always looking. I have been playing the fuck out of Final Fantasy 14 lately, like grinding the hell out of it. So having stuff to listen to in the background, especially when I beat the main story quest line and it's time for me to go back and unlock all the zones, get flying with the Aether bobble things and all that. I'm gonna need stuff to listen to while I game, so that's gonna be good. I'm interested.
All right, well, I'll try and put out some good content on Mike Johnson. Thank you so much for the conversation, and honestly, really nice to hear the story about your mom overcoming like it sounds like a problem or a fear in her life. It's always nice to see people acclimate into being more comfortable with themselves in the world, right? That shit rocks.
Yeah, and I also think that like one of the my final statement is, if in this country you are outnumbered by guns, and if you are someone who is afraid of or inexperienced with guns, please, as long as you think it is as long as you don't think that you are genuinely not capable of handling a gun, like unsafe, like mentally or whatever, I think most people are probably safe to go to a range. Like, you know, it's not very expensive to shoot a gun at a range. It really isn't. But emphasize, I have never shot a gun before, and I'm nervous. Could you walk me through it for my first time when I'm on the range? Because they're going to always give you, like, a basic test right there at the counter, but sometimes they just let you off on your own if you don't, like, give them the indication enough that you don't know what you're doing the first time. So emphasize you need help, and they will help you. They will have a range officer help you. It will be for free. They'll like help you shoot the first few magazines out of the gun until you're confident doing everything that it does. And I recommend doing a lot of research beforehand on YouTube, but it's good to get that like one-on-one teaching in person. Shoot a gun in real life. Learn how it functions for a variety of reasons. One, it's cool to break that fear if you have it, because it's just cool to do that, you know. Goodbye, fear. And also, learning how guns function is very important. Most importantly, gun safety. How to basically clear a firearm and make it incapable of shooting. How to put a gun out of battery so it's not capable of shooting. How to turn on the safety if it has one. I don't have one on mine. That kind of thing, right? How to tell if it has a round in the chamber. These are useful bits of knowledge because with more guns than people in this country, as insane as it may sound, you could end up in some crazy situation where you find yourself, I don't know, let's say you're walking through the park and you notice a gun in the bushes and you're like, oh fuck, there's a gun in the bushes. And you're freaked out by guns, but you look around, you notice you're surrounded by kids playing in the park. You're in a park. And so you go and you're like, oh no, oh no. Now your car is maybe like 10 feet away. So if you can pick up this gun and successfully clear it to ensure it's safe and stick it in your pocket and walk to your car, you can put it down in the seat, call the police and non-emergency line and report a found lost firearm. And if you don't know how to use or how a gun functions in a situation like that, you're not going to know what to do. You're going to be freaked out. You won't know how to unload and clear it. You'll be freaked out about whether or not, like, you maybe not even won't even know not to keep your finger on the trigger, right? You might not even know proper trigger safety. There's just a lot of things that you can glean that are useful in America when it comes to like learning how to shoot a gun. It's a very valuable skill. Even if you're not super into it and you never do it again, I highly recommend doing it at least once. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge part of yes, it's important to have as many experiences as you can, just from the perspective of understanding how the world works. This is like something that's really important for the life and death of like half of the country.
Yeah.
It's a huge hobby for half the country. Like, yeah, it's worth knowing how. I don't know. It's sort of like this is a dumb analogy. There was that post that went viral about Indian food. It's worth having Indian food like at least once. It's worth doing everything at least once to some degree, just for the purpose of understanding how a huge portion of humanity lives. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, as Cherry just asked, do you want to go shooting?
Yeah, when I come up, when I go to Seattle, are
Hell
you
yeah.
in? Oh,
Yeah, I'm
how
in
many
Seattle.
people? Are you Demon Mama? Is everyone? Are all the cool people up in Seattle?
Me, Demon Mama, Vosh, Conyer,
Oh my god,
Doe. Um, who else is in Seattle? I think that's everybody.
the
I might.
leftist media industrial complex is in Seattle.
Yeah, we're built. Well, on top of that, Seattle actually has a pretty good system. Oh, and also Mr. Epsilon. I do need to talk to him in real life. But like the funny thing is, Seattle has one of the only programs their police department does, I should say, to help streamers avoid getting swatted. You can,
Oh
and I
yeah.
have done this. You can call the local police department non-emergency number, and just simply say like, "Hey, my name is blah blah. I live at blah blah." And I am an online content creator. I have a pretty sizable audience, but I receive a fair amount of negativity online, and I'm at a pretty high risk of getting swatted. They know what the term is. They have a task force for this. They'll route you into that group. You put in your information there, and they'll give you a password, basically. And they'll also call you if any like police calls are made to your home or to your address. And it's just a really good system because you won't get swatted, like you can literally put a stop to it before it happens because they warn you, and like there's like a password system. Makes you a little less safe when it comes to calling the police, but I'm willing to make that trade because fuck, at least they've got a system to avoid getting you getting swatted.
Yeah, I mean there's so many fucking stories of that. So many videos of people getting taken off on live on stream.
Yeah.
Um, well, thank you for having me on. I hope you enjoy your blue state with his great gun laws. Hopefully, to get a little better with better Democrats in the future. Um,
I think Colorado might be the end game, honestly. It's got the best of both worlds.
um,
Very good.
well, it was.
Oh,
Go
sorry, I'll
ahead.
let you go.
No, no, no.
Like Colorado's policy, as far as I'm aware, is really good on pretty much everything socially. They're good on weed. They're good on like gay rights, stuff like that. But they're also really good on guns, from what I heard.
I will say the one area where Colorado might be coming short is Colorado is one of 4 states that passed a public health option, but the 3 of those states passed like I don't know how else to call it, but the most neoliberal public health option that you could possibly do. It's run through a private company that the state subsidizes, and they've had really, really poor results getting people to sign up to it. I think Washington's went into effect, and like less than 1% of the population signed up, which is terrible. Like in other countries that do this, like Germany, it's like 80% of the population. And it's partly because it's this really shitty outsourced version. The only state that does better is maybe Minnesota. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is like, again, it's not just a gun problem. It's also a mental health policy problem. It's a mental health access problem. And you can't have that without also solving universal healthcare access, universal healthcare, cheap point of service for poor people. So, and for
100%.
everyone.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think overall, this entire conversation loops back to we need to instill very strong social policies, like reformative social policies in this country. A lot of like the problems that we're talking about stem back to that. As much as the guns being in the hands of those people is a problem, those people not having the problems that make them use them for ill in the first place is like the ideal situation, right? And you know, obviously it's not a solution to just say, "Oh, gun violence, we'll just fix every problem that we have in the country" as like a response to it. But at the same time, it feels like some people see gun violence as a alternative to fixing those problems. Like, hey, there'll always be gangsters and there'll always be like criminals and you know, there'll always be crime and there'll always be like massive wealth disparity that leads to it. But hey, they'll have knives instead of guns and I can deal with that, right? Like people get by in the UK with that, right? And people just kind of resign themselves to that being the ideal scenario instead of actually getting to the root of the problem. And that's kind of what worries me. I don't know. I don't want to keep you here for too long. I'll let you do your final statement and then I'll let you leave without like saying anything else, okay? I want to try to get a quick outro. I don't want to end it so unceremoniously. It was such a good combo. I think it might have just been like a nudged chord.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, there you are. I can hear you.
All right. I think it was a Discord thing because it was failing to connect. It was an RTC disconnected, whatever. Okay. All I want to say is Republicans, they're like the sort of the inverse of the problem that you were just talking about. That they say they want to solve mental health problems. Whenever gun violence comes up, that's always the Republican excuse. They never want to propose any of the gun control problems solutions. They don't want to propose any wait periods. They don't want to propose any gun safes. They don't even often support like DVROs nowadays, like domestic violence stuff. But they do want to talk about mental health. But every time they talk about how important it is that everyone get access to mental health, they never fucking do anything about it. They've never passed in any state a bill to give people cheap, affordable public mental health access. Not once. It's because they don't really care. It's just an escape from it. And so I do want to say, like, again, I think some Democrats see just the gun control. That's the solution to the problem. And the Republicans very clearly are just stalling. It's like they're going to pretend that mental health is the only solution to the problem. And I guess maybe as a point of agreement between the two of us is that it has to be both and, that you have to get to the root of the problem. Crime is not just a gun problem. It's not just a weapon problem. It's a societal problem. The only way you can seriously reduce violence is getting at the root of why people engage in violence. Lack of hope, lack of resources, lack of education, lack of ability to get ahead. And you can't solve that without immense redistribution, immense social welfare programs. And we should also force everyone to buy a safe so that 500,000 guns don't get stolen every year. That'd be great.
Yeah, a lot of it, like my final statement is, holy gun owners, keep track of your guns when you take them out of the house. I cannot tell you how many gun owners I've met that can't remember how many guns they have in their car. Insane. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on today, SocDoneLeft. It's been a really fun having you on. It's been a really good conversation. I expected a little bit more contention than we had, but I guess it makes sense that we really mostly agree. It's just a matter of like, what is the most practical, ideal scenario? Because we really do agree on, I think, most practical policy besides, I guess, maybe a pistol ban. I just my belief is that we should just make it so strict overall that like you wouldn't need a ban on any particular type of gun because we'd have so many safeguards.
Yeah, and that might totally work. I will sign off. Thank you for having me on so much. I am Aiden from SocDoneLeft. You can find me at socdoneleft.org/live. I'm trying to stream more often, and it's really great to come on, Zan. Been loving your content recently. Hope this makes for a good segue.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I love having you on, and I hope to have you on again soon. Thank you for being here. And everybody, go check out SocDoneLeft. Good-ass content. Keep on spreading the ways of the data mail, my friend.
It's so true, King.
Data. All right. Have a good one, okay?
Good night. Bye.
Sleep well. That was a good convo. I always like having combos like that on here. Rarely do I get to have one that's friendly. That was fun. And I got to talk about guns. Anytime I get to talk about guns is a good segment. I'm sorry it wasn't much of a debate, and we pretty much agree on most stuff. Besides, like, I feel like the most spicy point of contention is really just, like, really whether or not, like, like, we should have bans on certain guns overall. But, like, when it comes to safeguards and gun safety policy, we're pretty much, like, on board 100%. The People's Armory pill. I've been People's Armory pilled. Can I show you guys that really fast? Hold on. Last thing I want to show you all. Walking Dead Alexandria Armory. Like, in the show, they have a lady who watches over the armory. She's, like, really trustworthy. Like, she's their most trustworthy person to do that job. And she, like, reloads all the magazines and checks all the ammo to make sure it's not faulty or fucked up. Because, you know, this far into the apocalypse, you're very likely to have fucked up ammo. And that can be life or death. So, like, you need it to be inspected very well. So she's inspecting ammo and loading magazines all day and keeping track of all the guns on like a registrar. And, you know, this lady here, Sasha, is coming in to take one of the guns out for a go, like out to go, and she's gonna have to sign it off. It's like a whole slip, and you know, she has to like check out the ammo, any shots she fired. She has to collect the shells if reasonable to do so, and bring them back because they can be reloaded. It's really cool. The show's really good if you haven't watched The Walking Dead, but they literally do. They have a socialist commune. Like, The Walking Dead is literally about a group of people in the zombie apocalypse working their ass off and fighting, like, psychopaths in order to build a socialist commune. Like, they're literally trying to establish communism. They, several times in the show, very on the nose, say, huh, that's ironic. I guess the communists won in the end. Just took the apocalypse to happen, but communism won. Like, they're just very on the nose about the fact that they are just doing communism. It's very cool. I highly recommend it. Go check out The Walking Dead. Based in Posadist build. It's not too far off, honestly.